Let me welcome our honorable guests, speakers, and all members of the audience to this edition of the ET Reality Convention. Without further ado, may I invite the Honorable Minister, Kumari Selja, to deliver her inaugural address.
Thank you, Arunji. Over the last 50 years, the urban population in India has grown almost fivefold, with most of the concentration in the larger cities. As per the 2011 census, India's urban population stands at 377 million, comprising about 31.1% of our total population. Consequently, most cities and their regions are facing issues of haphazard development in the urban periphery, environmental degradation, and depletion of natural resources. Cities are about agglomeration economies. The economies occur from specialization, division of labor, flow of information, knowledge, and expertise. Agglomeration arises from densification. Planned development can magnify the effect of agglomeration and reduce congestion. Hence, proper planning is an investment in the city's economic and social growth. The best cities in the world, such as New York, Paris, London, Singapore, received massive investments in planning. Over the years, regional planning approach with hub and spoke or trunk and feeder model has emerged as one of the most feasible urban planning options. This model dwells on transportation-led planning followed by strategic densification. However, let us not forget that the metro has been superimposed over the NCR region instead of being pre-thought. In fact, other mass rapid transit system, which is bus-based, has still to be integrated in the whole transportation system of this region. I'm hopeful that this convention will discuss other key issues as well.
It's my great pleasure to be present at this reality convention. The convention focuses on the national capital region as a proof of viability of hub and spoke model. It will also discuss how this model for the NCR region can be used in the country's development, in developing similar models all over the country. It's my pleasure to address you on the subject. The unprecedented growth of metropolitan cities in the country is a source of serious concern to government, metro city corporators, planners, demographers, and social scientists. It therefore goes without saying the focus of a sustained countrywide effort to plan for and regulate urban growth by channelizing the flow and direction of economic growth on which the urban phenomenon feeds along more balanced and spatially oriented paths.
Our next speaker is the Member Engineering of the Delhi Development Authority, Mr. Ashok Khurana. He has been working as an active engineer for more than 35 years. He has special expertise in urban redevelopment, particularly of slum redevelopment. May I invite him to please make his presentation.
Now the NCR region is quite big, but it has further scope to expand and link. We are forgetting Agra is quite nearby. Jaipur is quite nearby. Delhi, Jaipur, Agra are the huge tourism links. They can be satellite towns in the triangular shape can be developed. Agra is another focal point, Delhi is a focal point, and Jaipur is a focal point. If all the three focal points are linked, northern India, which is lacking in the facilities, which is lacking in the communication systems, can be developed nicely. But we have to shift now the load from NCR region also. NCR has a sustainability in the water requirement. If you see, the water is available in NCR between Yamuna and Ganga. That is the Noida area. There is no water available, very less water available in the Gurgaon area. So we have to look into the more alternatives. We have to widen our scope. How three hubs can be linked together again. We have to now think beyond what is available to us, how we can live within the available resources. That's my thought. Thank you.
Now we'll proceed to a panel discussion on this theme. Can I ask Mr. Raheja?
I was given this opportunity to speak on this, and I felt this is an interesting platform. When you observe, when you are doing something, you, I think, probably know much better. If you really want to move fast, balanced, we have to actually look into every component of your planning. Any sector where the incentivization is not there, people really don't work. The exactly same thing happened here, in whether it is NCR, whether it is other metropolitan cities in India. Development could not keep pace with the migration because India was growing, there was economic activity happening, and as the economic activity happens, there is migration from agricultural economy to industrialization. And when this kind of economic activity happens, you need to create compatible infrastructure which could never match. So these all issues came because of that. Nevertheless, there is nothing which cannot be corrected. Anything which is left unattended, that can also be taken care of at that moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Arun, for inviting us here and to be part of this prominent discussion. I have very eminent panelists with me, Mr. Khurana and, of course, Mr. Raheja, who has looked at this at a very micro level. Let me take it a little macro. I've had the privilege of studying a couple of spoke and hub centers, namely a district in Singapore called Ang Mo Kio and Toa Payoh, two studies that I've made. But when we come to the practical day-to-day implementation, is there a political will at the local level? That's a big question. Now coming to a macro level of a micro system, the local area planning. Local area planning cannot be done without the consensus of the landowners, the developers, the stakeholders who have to stay there, and the government, state government. Without a combination of these forces, then we are not taking the tide. This means looking at the micro level, water, electricity, sewage, telecom, security. Okay, these are tangible things. What about the intangible things like social infrastructure? If my family has to move into a certain area, which is a spoke, it must be like what Ang Mo Kio and Toa Payoh have done. So it's land given for building, office space, food centers, supermarkets, schools, security, hospital. It has to come as one package.
All the guests, one by one. Anshuman Magazine is already here. Mr. R.V. Verma, he's Chairman and Managing Director, National Housing Bank. We have Mr. Sanjeev Srivastava, he is Chairman and Managing Director, Asotec Limited. Gaurav Gupta is Director, SGS State. In the current session, we will basically be looking at urbanization's unprecedented pace it has been a daunting challenge, but it has also it is likely to throw up a lot of opportunities in terms of our economic prosperity. However, to harness that potential, the role of planning and governance, which we are going to discuss in these sessions. Mr. Verma, we'd like to start with you.
Yes, thank you, Rakesh. Urbanization is a matter of fact. It's a reality. And it has been accepted all over that if we have economic growth, there would be migration. So we take off from there. If urbanization has to happen, and the pace of urbanization, which is again important and which has been very critically examined also, and agreed that pace of urbanization in India is very high for whatever reason. There has to be proactive planning at the urban centers to accommodate the increasing growing population, and for that I think personally that planning for 5 years or 10 years is not adequate. It has to be for a long term. Like in China, for example, you have developed the infrastructure. They have looked at 20, 25, 30 years hence, and they have invested a great deal, maybe at the cost of some other sectors. But this is going to hold up the economy, or it is going to promote and catalyze the economic growth.
So proper planning for the long term is what is required.
Absolutely.
Anshuman.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mr. Verma. Long-term planning is a given that we should plan for 40, 50 years. But the problem in India is we are discussing the plan for 50 years. I was reading a book. It was very interesting that someone mentioned that in India, if you look at, there are problems, but if the Americans and Australians were forced to stay like this, people stay in Bombay and parts of Delhi with shortage of power, water, traffic problems, they would have killed each other and finished each other off. So instead of discussing for 30 years, it's better to even implement even for a short term.
In my opinion, the process of urbanization will not be complete till the time the affordable and inclusive housing is provided to all. And the best way I believe that this can be sorted out is through the PPP model, in which the land be allocated to the developers, and they make and hand-built houses and hand over back them to the government, so that they can be further distributed to the people who actually need them.
Right. Sanjeev? In fact, Mr. Verma has set the tone by saying that the city should be planned not like this of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, should be planned at least for 50 years. We should plan the city something like 50 to 75 years on an economic model. See example how much wealth Noida or Greater Noida has created to the whole of UP. Had it been 10 Noida in UP, things would have been much different. So everywhere, wherever growth of state are seen, they are localized, whether it is Gujarat or in Tamil Nadu, in Mumbai, New Bombay perhaps. So we should plan city long span and with solid economic model.
Let me begin by telling you that the ET Reality Convention is now 4 years old. Let me set the tone by picking up a few of the threads. One is the transport corridors. The second thing is the suburbs. Sometimes just good planning actually leads to a certain area coming up, and that is typical of Panvel. Therefore, we feel that if you take infrastructure to an area, you are actually opening up new areas for development. And then policy. If you're planning for a region, how can you have fractured policies in terms of FAR, in terms of taxation, in terms of the very governance process itself? The issues are many, and I think we should start by allowing our secretary to deliver his address.
Coming to the point straight without wasting much time, that what kind of policy should be, what kind of planning process there should be. Idea was that in the municipality itself, in the urban conglomeration, the core sector itself, land will not be available. It's basically, all of you know, it's basically just a simple land use planning, a spatial planning. The plan really doesn't reflect either any input of other developmental requirements, and we have almost 8 million cities now, which has a population of 5 million plus. So it's a huge explosive growth.
Having set the tone, Mr. Mehta, what does it take to make every city in India have public participation?
Well, there are 6 basic issues, I think, which are going to be very critical. Main infrastructure, that is water, power, transport, waste, health, and education. Within that, I would say that on the transport side, I think the argument would certainly be in favor of public transportation to be able to cater to the teeming millions. The second, I think, is the fact that cities are the greatest, polluters. The carbon footprints of cities are the biggest. The third, of course, is, you said, local empowerment. I think it's very important. The fourth is, of course, the whole debate between high-rise and low-rise. All around, you find a lot of high-rise coming up, and Delhi is still low-rise. So I think there should be no real problem with that. But again, with that will mean, higher energy costs, higher water requirements, higher, waste generation. How do you handle that? Because that's ultimately going to link up to that.
Now we've got two private sector developers. When you develop townships, how do you plan for governance? Shailesh.
We in Maharashtra do have a good township policy, which is not implemented to that greater effect. So we have so many issues in the Special Township Act. That's why we tend to avoid going to special township and tend to develop townships on our own. But if you are developing township on a larger scale, nearer to the city center, where the land prices are high, we'll plan a bigger hospital, we'll plan a school maybe which is ICSE or even international board. We'll plan other social infrastructure, keeping in mind I'll have a bowling alley there, I'll have a bigger shopping center there. But what about the linkages? The linkage support to the city center, government has to come in.
Let me go to Mandeep Singh. Are you planning for economic hubs away from the central hub, and then allowing infrastructure to move there?
Whether the economic centers are first developed and later the infrastructure develops, or vice versa. There have been various models which have been looked in by the planners, where of course you can't have a private area for which you have to travel to city to work. I personally say, why should a person be spending so many hours on road in addition to using the energy? So why can't he could utilize his, how many hours one spends on the road? Fair enough, you are mobile while on the road, you can you can do your business. But at the end of the day, it reduces quality of life. So quality of life is very important for that, a holistic planning in my view, where together things have to grow, not in different compartments, as said by the earlier, that you have different authorities. And similarly, I say, not only authorities, why different planning disciplines?
The excitement
for us urban town folks, the townies, when we think of land, we just think in terms of investment, something which after a few years or decades will yield us a very attractive return, and that would probably finance a nice cottage in Goa at some stage for us to retire. But look at the marginal farmer or artisan in a small village or a hamlet somewhere. For him, land is his be-all and end-all. But before we kind of get into and deep dive into some of the more specific and granular issues, it will be useful for the panel here. And Madam, if I can start with you, coming from the government and therefore having a bird's eye view over what's happening. If you can just start off by giving your perspective on, what is it that is going wrong?
I don't think we are at all unique in facing these challenges. So the government of India has attempted to come up with a bill where, learning from the experience of places like Nandigram and Singur, etc., the objective is to bring in a fair method of compensation and make the compensation attractive enough so that those who are actually losing will then be able to move on, and government and industry and infrastructure will get access to the kind of land that they require.
I think point well made, and clearly there is a fair degree of, I would say, enthusiasm with which the new bill has been greeted. But the only challenge, and Mr. Sharma can react, coming from the developer's perspective. So what do you think, Mr. Sharma, would be the key issues as a developer that immediately come to my mind? Not necessarily, let's not focus ourselves only on this bill. Let's look at a slightly big picture and see what else can be done, given the challenges of almost paralysis which we are facing currently.
See, as Madam and yourself has stated, the present acquisition bill has been focused on incentivizing the people who is being displaced from their livelihood and their homes. See, in present, if you think about the present bill, there are certain issues, though we have been interacting with the committee, we have been interacting with the urban development ministries everywhere. And of course, they have been taken into account our views and the view of the stakeholders. In that case, suppose you are going to acquire or buy or purchase more than 100 acres of land to have some industrial project or housing project or any urban development project. In that case, there are a lot of gaps which you have to face, like social impact analysis. Secondly, I would like to say that we are defining public purpose. Of course, public purpose is a very concurrent issue, very sensitive issue. It was not clearly defined in the old land acquisition bill. Only because of that we are facing a lot of litigation.
I think you raised a couple of good points, and I will request Prabhakar to react to it.
In NCR region particularly, the farmers are well compensated. So if you go deep into the way the compensations are given and the way the farmers are reacting, it is more of a political issue rather than a economic or other issues. And so then the colonizers develop their completely unauthorized colony, making fast bucks, but then that entire area becomes completely unauthorized and unlivable. So because of that, what happens that these farmers want to sell these lands. First they think that, okay, authority will develop this area, and then they sell that land to the colonizers to make fast bucks. Authorities, they are giving them a compensation of something around cash compensation of 40 lakh of rupees, and then after they give them also 6% of the developed land, and that is per acre is around 240 square yard. And if you take the minimum price of 10,000 rupees per square yard, that comes out to be 24 lakh. So the total price that farmers are getting is almost 64-65 lakh of rupees. Now, see, if they use that land just for the farming, they can make at the most 30 to 40,000 rupees per annum. Okay, whereas the compensation is 64 lakh of rupees. That doesn't mean that I am also arguing for that, okay, you can take their land without asking their consent. Consent is required. But certainly if the farmers are true and they know it, that they cannot use this land except for the purpose of the farming, they will certainly give this land to the authority to make use or to urbanize that land. But that is not happening. This is, I am telling you here, the authority is also hand in gloves with this kind of a colonizers. They are allowing them to do it. So NCR region, certainly this is that kind of a problem, and here I believe it is more of the political issue, administrative issue, rather than the economic issue.
And I think that's where some of those gaps this bill is hopefully going to cap.
That will be useful.
Anurag, you've been having a view beyond the NCR region, given your national presence, but then again we are talking about select pockets where just things happened right. So, do you have any insights into what can be, what your experience has been?
My view is, as a nation, as a society, we need to have a vision, or we need to at least have a consensus on where does land fit in, and what do we want to do about it, and how do we deal with it. At the moment, I think it's in a very peculiar state. I mean, it's a very emotive issue for some people. Do you really want to treat land with such emotion and with such challenge and with such stress? Is my question, and the answer is no. We're a growth economy. We're growing, give or take 8% every year, and it's a $1 trillion economy. Land has to be an enabler for everything. I mean, you have a housing shortage in this country. You need land for industry. You need land for manufacturing, for urbanization, for every possible thing that you can think of.